Our focus standard for today's lesson comes from Grade 7, Geometry, Standard A. Construct and describe geometrical figures, describing the relationships between them. Our topic comes from our Analyzing Geometry Relationships unit, Congruent Figures. Our essential question is, how do we recognize and describe relationships between congruent figures? Please take a moment pausing the video if you need to copy down the topic and essential question in your header along with today's date, set the question column and the note column, and resume the video when you're ready to begin. Here we're looking at two polygons, quadrilaterals to be exact, and we're being told that they are congruent. So this figure ABCD, named by its vertices, is congruent to figure WXYZ. So we want to think about, what does it mean to be congruent? What do you notice about these two figures? Well, to be congruent means that these two shapes have the exact same size and shape. Let's take a closer look at what I mean by that. Do you see what I did there? I took the shape and I rotated it counterclockwise. And now you can see that it looks very much the same as this shape. In fact, as you can see, I can overlap them almost perfectly. And they're the exact same size, meaning all the side lengths are the same measurement, and the angles are the same measurement. Angles are what give figures their shape, and the side lengths are what give figures their size. So congruent figures have the same size and shape. They're exactly the same. They're like a copy. So if we undo that, you look at them, I'm going to leave it rotated. When we're describing congruent figures, we like to list their corresponding attributes, their corresponding characteristics. In this case, first we want to talk about their corresponding sides. So for figure ABCD, I've already listed out each of the 4 side lengths for this figure. Side AB, side BC, CD, and side DA. So that's what I've listed here. What I want you to do is list what are their congruent sides on and corresponding sides on this figure. So for example, as you saw when I overlapped these shapes, this side AB matched up perfectly with this side. They're the exact same length, and they are the exact same part on the same shape, so they're corresponding. So line segment AB corresponds to and is congruent to side YZ. So we'd want to write that here. Can you fill in the rest of these blanks? How'd you do? Here I've listed out the corresponding side lengths from figure WXYZ, and I've also marked it with the tick marks. So side AB is corresponding and congruent to side YZ, they're the matching side. BC is congruent and the corresponding side to ZW. Side DC is congruent and corresponding to side XW. And side AD is congruent, or DA as I listed it here, is congruent and corresponding to side XY. So now I've listed out the angles from our first figure, ABCD, can you list out which angles on figure WXYZ correspond to these angles that are corresponding and congruent? How'd you do? Angle A corresponds and is congruent to angle Y. Angle B corresponds and is congruent to angle Z. I'm using the angle arcs to mark that, you might have noticed. Angle C is congruent and corresponding to angle W. And angle D is congruent and corresponding to angle X. That's what we've listed out here. So for two figures to be congruent, they have to be the same size and the same shape. And that means once we find their corresponding sides and their corresponding angles, the pieces that match up when we imagine overlapping them will be equal in measure, will be exactly the same. Let's try that with one more shape. Here I've drawn two more pairs of congruent figures. So I have figure LMNO, and it is congruent to figure STUV. So what I would like you to do, and I'm not going to rotate it this time, but you can imagine rotating these shapes to see how they would match up. And I'd like you to start by imagining that and then seeing if you can figure out which side links on this figure correspond to the side links I've already listed here from figure LMNO. And then we're going to do the same thing with the angles. Go ahead and pause the video to do your work, and then be ready to check back. How'd you do? So here, once again, I've listed the corresponding, meaning the side that matches up and is equal in length from this figure to that figure. If we overlap them, what sides would be exactly the same? So we've listed that out here, and I've used the tick marks. If you haven't done so already, please do the same thing for the angles. Can you figure out which angles from shape LMNO correspond and are congruent to the angles on STUV? How'd you do? So once again, I've filled it in. I've also marked it with the angle marks, but it was getting a little messy, so you might want to rely here. And before we completely wrap up this video, I have one last request. You may have already done this, but you may have noticed that I listed two measurements here. So side length LM is 4 inches long, and angle U is 18 degrees. So I want you to use the corresponding sides and angles to label the corresponding measurements. What side length on this shape can you fill in the measurement on? Because you know that LM is 4 inches. And knowing that angle U is 18 degrees, what angle on this figure do you know is also 18 degrees? So take a moment to label that. Let's check back and we'll wrap it up. That's right. We already noticed it here. We said that LM is congruent and corresponding to side TS. So we know that this side is equal in measure. So if this is 4 inches, then ST is also 4 inches. And if angle U is congruent and similar to angle O, then angle O must also be 18 inches. We'll be doing more work with identifying corresponding sides and angles in congruent figures. Please make sure your notes are complete and come ready to do more problems like this in class.